Welcome, everyone, to a fresh episode of Draft on Tap. And the bad news is that Danny and Neil are unavailable right now. But the good news is that we've got a great show planned for you today. We've got 3 segments. The first segment is going to be members of the Irish Bear Show will join me, and we'll talk about the upcoming draft. And then segment 2 is a one-on-one interview I had with Jordan Reid of ESPN Sports, draft analyst there. And then segment number 3 are some of our scouting reports that I'm releasing that were posted on our Patreon page. I've edited some of them down, and so we'll give you some Greg Gabriel and Danny Shimon scouting reports exclusively for you here on Draft on Tap. Let me bring the guys in first. I'm going to do this because I screw up names all the time. I am one of the worst people in the world with introductions. So what I'm going to do is bring them in one at a time, ask them to introduce themselves and tell me where they are broadcasting from. Let's start with this handsome man. How are you, brother? And tell me who you are and where you're broadcasting from.
Well, I am Kieran. I am one of the hosts of the Irish Bear Show, and I am broadcasting from my office in Dublin. So yes, it's great to be on the show. Absolutely enjoy talking to you. We've been friends for a long time, so it's good to be able to get back on the show again.
Indeed. You're one of my favorite Bears Twitterers, and your show, the Irish Bear Show, and the website is just fantastic, robust, with tons of information. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Let me bring in contestant number 2.
Hello, how you doing? My name's Tony Daly. I'm also a host on the Irish Bear Show. I'm the good-looking one, obviously. So, hi, how you doing? And I'm currently broadcasting live from my spare room in a small town just outside of Glasgow, Scotland. So we're based all over the place in the Irish Bear Show.
I love that. And the next gentleman I know is a little closer to my home. Let me bring him in now. How are you, Seth? Introduce yourself and tell us where you're at.
I am Seth, another one of the guys over at the Irish Bear Show, and I am over in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
All the way from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Look at that. I love it. And Seth, how'd you get hooked up with the Irish Bear Show?
Randomly, they were looking for writers once upon a time, and I had been meaning to get into it, and so I submitted a 3,000 word mock draft thing to them, and then they hit me back up, and I started writing for them a little while ago.
Yeah, I think I told them I'm not reading 3,000 words.
I once read a analytics article that said that the most clicked on articles are ones that are around 3,000 words. And I guess, it came from a reputable research organization, a search engine or optimization article. So, Seth, you're onto something. And Seth, you were telling me that you just published an article about 5 draftees that are under the radar. You want to clue us in on that article?
Yeah, so just posted up. I wouldn't say, they're necessarily like my top 5 sleepers of the entire draft, but 5 sleepers to get to know ahead of this, to get to know ahead of Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. There's some names you might recognize on there, Kobe Turner being one of them, but the rest might be guys you're not familiar with. One I'm most excited about to see what happens with him would be EJ Jenkins, and you guys can check out the article to find out why.
Awesome. Look at that. That's a great tease, as we call it in the business. Guys, I want to talk about what is been the top story of the morning, at least based on my limited time looking at the news. Besides the Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon thing here in the United States, both were released or fired or however you want to put it. But in the sports world, the thing that we're most interested in right now is there is a rumor, a report that Paris Johnson might be selected by the Arizona Cardinals at number 3 if they are unsuccessful in trading down. Now, the source of that article, I'm not sure exactly where that came from, but I saw it on multiple tweets. And so, Kieran, I'll start with you. What have you heard about this, and how disruptive is this to your plans of giving Justin Fields an offensive line?
It breaks my heart, Aldo. It breaks my heart. I saw this morning, or today. Some of the lads are telling me, and I was like, you gotta be lying to me. This can't be happening. And then I kind of read it a little bit, and it's like, it reminded me of just a team in the Arizona Cardinals. I think they're trying to force their hand to move down, because I think they're at a position where they're probably happy enough with Kyler Murray as their quarterback and realize that if they're going to get better, they don't want to be in the top 3 again. So moving back is probably what they want to do. For me, it seems like what they're trying to get is one of these teams that may have been interested in moving up before to try and jump over the Indianapolis Colts, especially with all the rumors of kind of the Houston Texans not taking, or maybe not taking, a quarterback at 2. I think they're trying to leverage what they might have to get somebody to move up. I sure hope so, because I think, for me, I've always been of the opinion that Paris Johnson Jr. is the number 1 offensive tackle in the draft. I know a lot of people like either kind of Skoronski, some people like Darnell Wright, some people like Broderick Jones, but for me, it's always been Paris Johnson. And I just think that would be a really good fit for the Bears, and it'd be unfortunate if he did go 3. I think it's still less likely than what's kind of been coming out here today, because I do think there'll be a team that maybe want to jump over the Indianapolis Colts. I'm hoping so, but it's definitely not a guarantee. We all know in the draft, in the round 1, always expect the unexpected. So it could happen, but again, I think it's still a little bit more likely that he doesn't go at 3. I guess one of the other interesting articles that came out today was what Albert Breer said in his article today, in terms of at the Ohio State Pro Day, that one of the scouts mentioned that Ryan Poles was zeroing in on Paris Johnson Jr. at that point in time as the offensive tackle. And we kind of heard the same around that period of time. We had an Ohio State beat reporter on the show, and he said to us kind of off air, basically, that the Bears had met with Paris Johnson at the Combine. They had a meeting planned with him before the Pro Day and after his Pro Day. So again, it was very obvious that the Bears had at least a sizable enough interest in Paris Johnson. So that didn't surprise me when I saw Albert Breer's article today. But it's kind of like two contrasting ones, not really know what's happening. But I think there's probably interest there from the Bears. But yeah, I think it'd be kind of worrying if he did go at 3, just not knowing then where does the next domino fall at offensive tackle, and does that happen before number 9? If that's the situation, I think then I'd be panicking before the Bears are on the clock.
Indeed. Tony, what's your take on this Paris Johnson rumor?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, we're looking at a situation where we're 3 days removed from the draft. Things are being said, stories are being put out. Folk are trying to entice people to trade up and trade down.
On that thought, Tony pauses for reflection. Let me go to Seth while we get our connection with Tony back. Seth, your thoughts on this rumor, and I think Tony was just about to say this is the lying season, so you can't. Anything, right?
I believe nothing this week. Like, I take everything this week with an absolute grain of thought, and you know, would it be surprising to me if that did indeed happen? Yes, but I think it would be interesting to see where everything falls after that. Because if they take, tackle at 3, and say the Texans don't take a quarterback, then the Bears might be in a position where they can trade down, because it's really easy to say, oh, just trade down. But, you need two people, two parties to trade. And if there's nobody there that, somebody is willing to part with, future picks for, well, then you can't just trade down just because you want to. And if, some of these quarterbacks fall to say 9, then, you can see a Titans trade up or something like that. So, tackle wise, you'd like to see him fall to 9, because, I do agree in terms of just pure offensive tackle. He is the best in this class. I'm not massively high on this class, but you could do a heck of a lot worse. But I just don't believe anything right now. If you told me that, number 1 overall Anthony Richardson goes, it could happen. I have no idea. None of us really know this week.
That is absolutely correct. We don't know anything, but it's fun to speculate. And I'll tell you, one of the immediate thoughts that I had when I heard of the news about Paris Johnson potentially being selected at number 3 is I've been hoping that all of these offensive tackles would be available at number 9. That way there is a huge comfort factor in trading down 5 or 6 spots. And so now if Paris Johnson is gone, who knows? Maybe Broderick Jones is selected before 9, and all of a sudden that quantity of tackles to choose from, if you trade it down to the middle of the round or so, has been depleted. Tony, you were right in the middle of saying don't believe anything. I think that's where you were headed. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, what I wanted to do, there's a running joke about my Wi-Fi.
Shit.
I wanted to bring that from the other show onto this show, just to make the viewers from the Irish Bear Show feel at home. So anyway, as I was saying, there's a lot being said just now by a lot of different people. Things are being put out there to try and get people to move up and down. So, I take everything with a pinch of salt. But at the same time, I think there's guys out there that do
It was it looked like you,
Paris Johnson.
Tony. Go ahead, Tony.
I think Paris Johnson is in my opinion, he's the top tackle in the draft. And if it were to go at number 3 overall, for instance, it wouldn't really be that bad, because at the end of the day, it's a premium position, and it would make sense for someone to want to bring in, the starting left tackle of the future at that point in the draft. We've seen it at the number 1 overall pick before, with lesser players, as Seth was alluding to offline before we came on. So it's not a huge surprise, but whether or not it's actually a thing that would happen, I guess we'll find out on Thursday night. But I think there's definitely fire where there's smoke when it comes to the Cardinals want to move down. I think that's well known that they're interested in trying to trade back and get as much as they can. And the number 3 spot is prime position for someone to get a quarterback, never mind the tackle. So all eyes on someone coming up for that position. But I guess we'll see. And also, I'm not in a cave. I just live in the middle of nowhere, Jordan, so apologies.
It's not a cave. It's Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi can be dangerous in the middle of a city or out in the boonies, as we call them here in the United States. It's just so unreliable. But something Jordan said here. Okay, so he writes, this is all fine by him if the offensive tackles are taken. He wants Van Ness at number 9. Bergeron or Saldiveri in the late 2nd, early 3rd is fine. And the problem I have with that, and Kieran, I see you shaking your head, so I'll go to you after I say this, is don't we want the absolute best for Justin Fields in 2023? Because you've got to make this huge decision in 2024 if you're going to pay him somewhere in the area of Jalen Hurts money. So if you are going to seek protection for him in the 2nd round, you're really not doing him any favors. Kieran, your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I've always said that this draft needs to be about what's best for Justin Fields and also what's best for the Bears moving forward. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm sick of kind of always going defense the whole time. Look, it's different if it's clearly the better player is the defensive player. Okay, fine. But like, we do have to look at this, how our team's built now. And there's certain guys that I look at where you need to try and look at, can you get them later on? And personally, I'm just, in terms of just who kind of Jordan said, I'm not a big fan of Van Ness, especially that high up in the draft. I'm like, I understand there's a lot of people that like him at that area. I don't see it, so I would be against that. But I agree. I think when you look at it, I feel like you can get by on the defensive line if you don't go that in the first round. I don't think you can get by if you ignore offensive tackle for too long, because we've seen Bears fans for the entirety of last year complain about the offensive line. We bring in kind of the interior. Some people feel good about the 2 guard spots, and I know there's still question marks about the center, but people were complaining about Braxton Jones, and I disagreed with that. But then you see the same people that will say, well, then you don't need to go get an offensive tackle straight away in round 1. Well, for me, I think you do. You need to protect Justin Fields. You just went out and made a big trade to go get a wide receiver. Why stop now? Why stop now in terms of being like, oh, we got the wide receiver, we can wait? Nah, get the best offensive tackle that's on the board for me, especially if it's similar to kind of let's say the defensive player, right? Like, let's say they have, I don't know, Jalen Carter's there at 9, and they have Paris Johnson there at 9, and they have them basically at a similar grade to each other. I'd rather go for the offensive tackle because I think that's actually more beneficial for how they want to build this team. It's very obvious that over the next 2 to 3 years, they want to build around Justin Fields. And like you said, you need to know if he's definitely going to be the guy. I believe he's the guy. I think based on what Luke Getsy said this week, he believes he's the guy. But you do have to make a decision soon on if you're going to pay him like he's the guy. And the only way of doing that is surrounding him with talent that actually allows him to succeed. I think we've seen that now at wide receiver, where I think you can say there's 3 viable wide receivers on the team that can be good for him. I don't think we can say that with the offensive line yet, because I still have question marks all over it. Like, there's still a lot to be said about Braxton Jones. Will Tevin Jenkins be able to stay healthy for the entirety of the year? And really, you have nothing on the other side in terms of the offensive tackles. Your Braxton Jones, there's not a single other offensive tackle in this team that I feel confident in if they had to play week 1. And that's why I think you have to go out at 9. If there's one of the top guys there, I think you take that and you don't look back. And I think then Bears fans can kind of relax going into day 2, knowing you've secured a player at probably the most important position you need to make sure that you fill in this draft.
I got to tell you, a lot of people in the chat room, led by Jordan and Swifty, are saying, excuse me, Swifty, if I got your a chat note there incorrect, but they're saying, well, what about Braxton Jones? What are we doing with him? He was a 5th round draft pick. Well, Braxton Jones was a placeholder. He wasn't drafted with the thought of he's going to be our immediate starter at left tackle. The fact is that he won that job partly because he played better than anticipated, but also because there was just nobody else to play the position. Let's be honest here. And how many times did we swear at Braxton Jones last season when he would give up a sack because he was bull rushed? Now, he shows incredible promise. He's got the athletic skills to play the position the way Luke Getsy wants it played, but he is still not a above average left tackle, and hopefully he will get there after this full off season of weight training and getting some anchor to himself. Seth, your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, like it's been said, it really depends how the board falls with how it's seen. I kind of have these tackles rated a little differently than some. So, like, if there was a situation where you are able to get a Matthew Bergeron, say at 53, I would be comfortable with that as long as you have some value there at 9. And especially in the circumstance if, Paris Johnson Jr. is gone and maybe you're not necessarily sure exactly what, who else is going to be there as the board's coming your way, and you've got a choice between like a Jalen Carter or Broderick Jones. You got a tough decision to make. I would venture to say that you'd probably be better off with a Jalen Carter and a Matthew Bergeron in their respective positions versus a Broderick Jones and, insert 3 technique here in the second round or later. But that also just depends on where Carter's head's at and how he's doing. If they take Jalen Carter at 9, then, they clearly believe in how things are going. So, I wouldn't be against that because I do think there are, there's the Bears use like different colors. Everybody uses like the blue chip stuff like that, but they have like blue for the elite guys, red for like guys who can start and do things. And I think there are some quality, red level tackles in this draft. And I think, going to Bergeron at 53 wouldn't necessarily cause me to sound the alarms just yet.
Tony, you want to put a bow on this topic before we move on?
Yeah, so firstly, Braxton Jones, I'm absolutely enamored with him at the moment. What I will say is that you've picked up a guy in the 5th round. He's absolutely not going to be perfect. That's why he's in the 5th round. That's why he's not a 1st round pick. That's why he's not a 2nd round pick. He has the core tools and athleticism to be, ceiling's high, so to be a good player. And it's all about taking that ball of clay, bringing it in to the workshop and having the coaches mold him into something that is better than he currently is. And we can see after only 12 months that that's happening. He's going to have a full off season potentially as a starting left tackle, unless the Bears feel that they want to move him to the right side when they bring in another tackle. I don't know. We'll need to wait and see what they think. So, you're hoping for a big step up this year. If you don't see it, then you can start saying, that this maybe isn't going to work out. But based on the trajectory and the way that he's been playing, the projection is that he's going to be the starting left tackle, and he's probably going to be better than he was last year. In terms of who you bring in, Broderick Jones is another option. The other thing I'll say, just in terms of the right tackle and who you bring in, right tackle, left tackle, whichever way you want to look at it, is right now I would say Paris Johnson is the best NFL ready tackle. But I would say Broderick Jones could potentially, in the long term, be a better prospect. Not right away, just based again on the core tools that he has. Similar to that kind of idea of Braxton Jones. No one was talking about Braxton Jones last year, obviously, but some people actually had a 3rd round grade on Jones last year. So some people were, but it could go either way. But I think whichever tackle comes in will probably tell you how the Bears view Braxton Jones. I think if it's Broderick Jones that comes in, I think he'll more than likely play on the left and Braxton play on the right. And if it's Paris Johnson, for instance, he could probably play on the right because he's already played a lot of right guard in college. So it would be an easy transition. But yeah, a lot's going to come out in the next few days about how the Bears feel about the tackle position. And who knows, they might have another guy on their mind that we're not talking about right now. I think the big question though is Carter. If he's at 9, the Bears have got to be sitting going, right, Jesus, do we want to take this guy? Is it going to be there's going to be problems with this guy in the future? Is there behavioural issues, all that kind of stuff? But he's clearly the better player versus going, you know what, let's just leave it and take our tack. I think it's fascinating to see what happens. Another fascinating thing about this draft is there's no surefire top 10 order at the moment, really. We have no idea who the overall number 1 is going to be, never mind who the first tackle is going to be. So I think it's a really, really interesting year in the draft, and I can't wait to get going.
Yeah, let's jump on that subject of Jalen Carter. Kieran, if he's there at 9, are you jumping on him?
It's a tough situation. I think it ultimately depends on who's still available. And the problem is, and I've said this on Twitter over the last day or so, I think it's really dangerous for people to say one thing or another with Jalen Carter with probably about a very limited amount of information that we actually have on him, because could he be there at 9 because there's something a little bit more serious going on than what we don't know? Or is it just that teams have decided to go in a different direction and you're getting a steal at 9. Kind of like in the similar vein of, I always remember when Quinnen Williams was falling a little bit further and he got to the Jets, because I think everybody had him as like a top 3 or 4 pick, and I think he went 6 maybe to the Jets that year. And could that be a similar situation with Jalen Carter? Look, if the Bears at 9 go ahead and pick Jalen Carter, I think it's very easy as a fan to get excited, because you just have to watch. You just have to watch what he does. You have to watch him on tape, and you're like, he could be a game wrecker. But then there's the other side of it is, well, does he have the want to? Does he have the motivation? Does he have the required mentality at the next level to be a great player, to be a game wrecker? And those are the two sides of it. And I think it's all going to come down to the individual kind of teams here. What worries me is he kind of screams out as like a Seattle type player. And then if you see a team like Seattle not take him, your question is like, why is that the case? Why is he not gone there? But look, I think at that point in time, I think for me personally, I think if a guy like Paris Johnson is gone, if a guy, not so much Broderick Jones, because I think he might be a little bit further, the expectation probably isn't in the top 10, but if 1 or 2 of kind of my preferred players in that top 10 did go earlier than we expected, I don't think I'd have a problem with Jalen Carter, but I'd still be asking the question is, what's the plan for offensive tackle? If that was the case, I'd probably be saying Bears may have to trade up in the second round to go and try and get one of the top guys that might fall into the second round. But like I said, I think if you're picking him at 9, you'd have to know that the front office feels comfortable with all kind of the off-the-field stuff. If they're comfortable with that, he's a phenomenal player. Like, we were talking about him as one of the top guys in the draft just a couple of months ago. So it's kind of wild that we're even talking about this, that if he falls to 9, that we're like, maybe. Because if we said this to each other back in January, that the Bears are going to trade down to 9 and Jalen Carter's going to be there, we're just going to be like, happy days. We trade down, we get all those extra picks, and we still get the player we probably would have picked at 1. Because I think that's where it was trending. So for Jalen Carter's sake, I hope that is the case where he does still go in the top 10, because I always like to believe in the talent. And I always hope that the off the field stuff is more of a media driven one, where it's he doesn't care and stuff like that. Because we heard the same thing about Fields. But the problem for fans, we have absolutely no idea, because none of us are there in the interviews. Most of the media only get a snippet of the information. And that's why I think when it comes to guys like Jalen Carter and people put their opinions out there on Twitter saying they shouldn't pick him, he's this, he's that, I think it's a very dangerous game, because for us, we only have a certain amount of information. These teams have met with him multiple times. My biggest concern of why I don't think that the Bears are going to do it is because it's very hard to come back from a performance in front of the entire front office at his pro day, when they sent so much of their staff down there and you couldn't finish the pro day. I think that's where I'm like, they're gonna have serious questions of if he's like that at the next level. Like, you can't do that. Like, Eberflus doesn't want that. He wants hard workers. He wants guys that are going to come in every single day and bust their ass for the Chicago Bears. And even if that is what Jalen Carter will do at the next level, on his pro day, he showed that, or he's at least put questions in the minds of front office people. Well, can he do that on a consistent basis? And I think that's going to be the biggest obstacle for any GM or any front office to draft him early in round 1. But look, I hope it happens if he's in the top 10, because he's a great player. And I always hate to think that some off the field stuff is going to affect the guy and where they get drafted.
You know, that you're absolutely right, Kieran. You know, regarding Jalen Carter, this is the most difficult player to guess, to speculate where he's going to go, because we're not, as you say, privy to the interviews. You know, I would I would pay $50 to see the interview that the Bears had with him, And so what I've done is I've gone to some of his post-game interviews or interviews during the week when he was in college at Georgia. And what I found was a guy who was very likable, seemed very sincere. I've heard his teammates talk about how generous he has been, that he helped to pay for a teammate who was on the team, but I don't think he was a scholarship guy, and so his meals weren't paid for, and he asked for a loan, and Jalen Carter learned about the fact that, this guy didn't have enough money to pay for his meals, and Carter started paying for those meals. So he's a very nice guy. But at the same time, there has been information being leaked about Carter that puts him in a bad light. And there's strong speculation that might be somebody over at Georgia who doesn't like Carter for some reason, and that they've sent out this information, the information about the auto accident, timed at a point that would hurt him, during the combine, so forth, all these other things. And so that's the mystery. That who are we getting? Are we getting this super nice, generous guy, or are we getting this guy who has created enemies at Georgia, allegedly created enemies at Georgia? So, I don't know. And so if he's there at 9, maybe these allegations are correct. Seth, what do you think?
Yeah, it's just one of those really bizarre situations, like I mentioned before, like you had those types of things come out about Fields, and he's put those to rest. So you got to wonder, are you getting, a Fields type situation, or is it more like Eddie Goldman, where the talent is there, the ability is there, but just the drive, desire, and the mental aspect of it just weren't. And, it's unfortunately, without being in those rooms and knowing those conversations, it's so difficult to say. You flip on the tape and the highlights are incredible. And, yes, you might see some things here and there on the tape that would lead you to think you take some things off here and there. But I mean, I could probably find you tape like that on every single guy in this draft. If you try hard enough, you can find something to hate. So you do have to take some of that with a grain of salt. But, it's a situation where if the Bears took him at 9, obviously you wonder what the other, 6 teams that potentially really would be in on him in the that pick before, what they were seeing. But from everything we've seen with polls and how they believe in this, culture and everything they're setting, if they took him at 9, I would be quite happy. But you almost go into it knowing that there is that element of risk, and Bears fans, we've seen it firsthand with Eddie Goldman. Those few years, he was the unsung hero, and then the COVID year happened. He seems like he just, was not in love with football anymore. And I can't say if that's where Jalen is. I hope not. You always want to wish the best, especially when the thing I feel like most of us forget is these are young men. And I feel like a lot of times we're, holding them out to the standard that, almost like they're 40, 50-year-old guys with tons of life experience. I don't know about you guys. I'm 9 years removed from being about as old as these guys are. I was an idiot in those days. I'm an idiot now sometimes, but so to hold these guys to—
That's what I was going to say.
About yourself or about Seth?
But you see these things and it's like, what would I do if I was 21 years old and had access to all of this money and all these people, trying to push you in any given direction? And then the other part of it is, maybe the money part of it is why there's somebody out there who hates him. Maybe he cut them off because he realized X, Y, and Z about them as a person. And now they're like, well, I lost my little gravy train, so now I'm going to cost you, X amount of $1 million. Because the difference between that number 1 pick and number 9 in terms of, dollars lost is a lot, and, maybe there's somebody out there who's just, angry that it didn't fall his way, because there are people out there, unfortunately, that do not have the best intentions. And this could be a case of that.
Tony, we know how important this 3-tech position is for this Bears defense. Are you willing to take a chance on Jalen Carter, because he would definitely fit the bill to a T and probably could even redefine the position, or at least be Aaron Donald-like at playing that position. Do you take a chance on a guy like that, or are you, as some people in the chat have said, why take a chance on a player? He could potentially be facing a civil lawsuit. That could be another distracting issue with him. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, again, this goes back to the whole point of none of us in this chat, none of us in the chat box, none of us on Twitter have a clue what has actually happened properly, nor have we spoken with Jalen Carter or his friends or his family or the people that knew him. And we know the Bears have done that. They've done a lot of work on that. So while we see it as taking a chance, you're taking a chance on every player that you draft, incidentally, for different reasons. But while we see it as taking a chance, in one way, they might see it as taking a chance in another way, because at the end of the day, they might have spoke to him, they've seen police reports, they've talked to family members, whatever, and they're happy. And in my mind at the moment, if the Bears are happy, if Ryan Poles is happy, then I'm happy to let him run with it and see what happens. End of the day, none of us are ever going to really be privy to what's going on or any conversations. So it's always really difficult as a fan or as a person who's obsessed with the draft about, what if Carter, what the information we're going off of is just media stuff, which a lot of times can be nonsense. Don't always believe what you read in the papers. I'm a big conspiracy theorist guy. Do you know what I mean? So I don't believe anything I read in the papers. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But the one thing I will say, because a lot of people are talking about how he turned up to the pro day. What I will say, and it's echoing something Seth said there, he's a 21-year-old kid. He is a kid at 21, okay? And I agree, Seth. I was an idiot when I was in my early 20s as well. And you have to keep in mind that this kid is in the mainstream media being tarnished as this, that, and the next thing, not to mention the fact he's going under this investigation. He's potentially losing money. He's getting pulled this way, that way, the next way. If we strip this all back and think about it from a human aspect, that guy is getting through a lot of stuff just now. Now, I'm not, casting judgment on whether or not he did something or he didn't do something or whatever. I don't know anything about it, okay? But what I'm saying is, as a 21-year-old kid, he's going through a lot of crap. He's turning up to his pro day, stressed out his box, a lot of stuff going on in his mind. I give him a bit of a pass for the pro day. But I will agree, though, and generally turn up to your pro day like that, it doesn't look good. But again, I think the personnel guys and the teams will realize. And again, if they can put things together and realize and find out that there's not as much of an issue there as they thought they were, then I'll just say there's more than one side to this story. That's really it.
And I'll say something real quick.
Please.
He went through that pro day. He easily could have just written that off. I've got too much stuff going on. I'll do private workouts. He gave it a go. And to that, I have to give him some level of credit, because he easily could have been like, guys, I've got all this stuff going on. I'll do private workouts for you. We'll set up something. Give me time. He was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it my best, even if it, potentially hinders, because that's a business decision at this point, And so you almost have to throw that in there as a good on him for not just giving up on that. He was like, I'm just going to go out there and do what I can. And I mean, if you watch those drills at the beginning of that pro day, you saw Jalen Carter. He just got gassed towards the end. And that's what happens who knows when he was last able to be in the gym and go through his conditioning program, there was a few weeks, a little bit of time in between there. And I don't know about you guys, but if I take 2 weeks off of running, that first run, man, kicks my butt.
Yeah, I think one of the big things here, and Aldo, I'll actually kind of get your opinion on it, because this is something we've spoken about, is, well, what's the strategy to the draft, especially early on? Because I always hear people saying, get the best pro-ready player. But then I always go back to, if we did that a couple of years ago, we would have Mac Jones and not Justin Fields, right? Like, people were saying stuff about the work ethic of Fields, which then other people were saying that's not true. People were calling him the last in type guy. And we all know that that's not true as well. So my kind of question to kind of you and then other Bears fans, what do we want to get out of round one? Do you want to go and swing for the fences? Because that's what I see round one as. Because I'm like, round one is when you need to get your elite talent. If you think that Jalen Carter is an elite talent, I'd much rather draft him. And okay, if he becomes like an average to above average guy because he doesn't have the willpower to be elite, I'd rather that than not draft him and somebody else get him and he actually turns into an all-pro guy that you could have got.
That's a great point, and I'm going to sound like the old fart in the room here because I am the old fart in the room here. But these excuses about him being a 21-year-old, I get it. When I was 21 years old, I was blowing coke, going out all night with women and stuff. I was a fucking asshole. But we have to stop using that excuse for young men and women nowadays. We have to hold people to a higher level and not excuse that behavior, particularly for a young man who is in a college football environment that is basically the foundation or the stepping stone to a multi-million-dollar career. It's something that will give him generational wealth. He should be smart enough and responsible enough to stay out of trouble and do the right thing. Now, again, I don't know if he's done anything wrong. So I'm offering that caveat here. But for anyone, any athlete that's in a situation, and really for any person, we have to start to get to a level where we don't immediately apply that 21-year-old, oh, he's just a kid kind of thing. Yes, I understand that's the reality of life, is that people are young and make stupid mistakes, but we have to hold on. We have to hold on to a higher level of accountability throughout the world, in Ireland too, not just America.
I agree. Personally, on the last note, in terms of the pro day, I actually blame his agent for letting him go out there because he clearly was not in the right frame of mind. And you could have easily just said, he's hurt. He could have done interviews with teams. That's fine. If I was his agent, I wouldn't have let him go and do those drills when he wasn't ready to do them. Mm-hmm. And it was clear by his shape and by how he was doing that weekend is he shouldn't have been out there. And I think some of that blame should go on his representation.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Anybody have a final thought on this topic before we move on? All right. Going once, going twice. All right, let's move on to the topic of, the top 2-3 cornerbacks in this class. I haven't watched much tape until lately when I've been preparing for the first round coverage. And oh my gosh, these top cornerbacks are coming out. Holy cow, they're good. I mean, these guys, a couple of them could be transformative defensive backs who just help out the other 10 players in this defense. They could basically close down a side of the field where quarterbacks will say, I can't throw it that way because it will be either incomplete or a turnover. So I'll ask you guys. I'll start with Tony. Tony, if one of those cornerbacks falls to 9, Carter is gone. There's still offensive tackles still on the board so that you can consider maybe trading back into the first round and getting one, or picking a Bergeron in round 2. Do you snatch one of these cornerbacks and say to all of the disgruntled Bears fans, we know what we're doing? What do you say, Tony?
Yeah, you remember the outcry when we went defensive back twice last year, so God knows what would happen if it went this year. But like, end of the day, cornerback is a huge need for the Bears still. I've been saying this for weeks, that I would genuinely not be surprised if the Bears took one, if they were ended and fell. So when you're looking at, for me personally, I'm a fan of Witherspoon as my number one corner, and I think it goes back to that whole thing about blue chip players and getting the best blue chip player you can get in the first round. Now, obviously, positional need does come into it as well. You've got to have a balance of both here, right? But corners a need, defensive tackles a need, offensive lines a need. You know, we're needed all over the place at the moment. You just need to look at the top 30 visits, and 15 of them have been defensive line or offensive line. There's only been 3 cornerbacks, incidentally. But staying on the subject of cornerback, if, for example, Witherspoon was there, he's in my kind of top echelon of players, blue chip. Then, yeah, if Carter's gone, if Will Anderson's gone, if Tyree Wilson's gone, if Paris Johnson's gone, those type of guys, even Nolan Smith as well, if he's gone, then I'm absolutely going corner. Because at the end of the day, we need someone opposite Jalen Johnson. I'm not overly sold in Kendall Vildor as the starter. He's been he was good last year, playing on the outside, no doubt about it. But we don't want to just be good. We want to be elite. So you have to look at ways to get better. And I think if you bring a guy like Witherspoon in, you're absolutely doing it. And let's be honest, people might come at me for this, but Jalen Johnson is not the second coming of the Messiah at cornerback. Do you know what I mean? Let's be honest, like the guy is good in fits and spurts, but his turnovers are way lower than they should be for a guy selected as high. But at the end of the day, if we were bringing a guy like Witherspoon or even Gonzalez, both of those guys are better corners than Jalen Johnson or anyone else that we have in the team at corner at the moment. So, in short, yes, if there was a corner available at 9, and depending on how the draft has fallen, then I would absolutely pick up a corner and feel good about it moving forward.
How do you feel about it, Seth?
I'm in the same boat. I kind of have Witherspoon and Gonzalez as 1A, 1B, but like this class as a whole is, I feel like corner and tight end of this draft class are kind of special positions. But I mean, you take the best player on the board at 9, and there is a solid chance that one of these two is the best player on the board, and you throw him in that secondary. It gives you the flexibility to not extend Jalen or trade him or something like that. Or best case scenario, you've got your secondary outside of obviously potentially replacing Eddie Jackson down the road, but you got your secondary set for a long time, and you can slowly work in other defensive linemen and stuff. But even if you don't have the greatest pass rush, if you got corners like that, we've seen elements of that work.
Mm-hmm. Kieran?
I love the corners especially the first round. And I know when you started mentioning that when you were looking at them, and if I was just ranking kind of the players in this draft class, I don't have any of the quarterbacks in terms of pure talent in the top 10. But I have 2 corners in the top 5, which is Devon Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez. But also, there's a damn good corner that's probably going to get picked in the middle of the first round in Deontay Banks. I love him as well. And also, Joey Porter Jr. is going to be a guy that teams are going to get to know very, very soon, because he's a phenomenal football player. He's going to be one of those like in-your-face type corners that whoever drafts him, teams are going to love. But like you said, Aldo, you look at Devon Witherspoon, we always talk about what we don't want to happen in front of us. And I'd be a little bit edgy if the Detroit Lions ended up getting Devon Witherspoon, because he's kind of like playing with Illinois, like that hometown type thing where he's in the area and then he goes to one of your rivals. And you're like, if he turns out to be as good as we think he is, you're like, damn. But then you have the same sort of thing with Christian Gonzalez. Like I've spoken to people from Arizona where they're like, we wouldn't mind if Christian Gonzalez was the player they picked at 3 if they stayed there as well, because you look at these guys and it's very rare for us to be talking about 2 cornerbacks that legitimately are top 5 to top 10 players in a draft class. And that's the reality this year. While it may not be kind of for some people kind of the sexy position at that point in time, like the talent is there. They're just really, really good. And that's the point. And look, that comment there says, what makes a cornerback great? A killer pass rush. Well, yeah, but corners can also help a pass rush because it gives you more time to get to the quarterback because nobody gets open too quick. And that's what you do see from some of these guys. And look, I really, really like what we could see here. I know Bears fans will freak out if it does happen at 9. But I think if it were to happen, and let's say it's Christian Gonzalez for some reason he falls to 9, I think the initial outcry will be there until maybe a day or two after the draft, and then people actually start watching how good Christian Gonzalez is, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, that's fine, that's good." Like if the Bears come away with, let's say, they don't go defensive tackle, they don't go offensive tackle, they get Christian Gonzalez, and then in round 2, somehow they come away with a guy like DeJuan Jones or Bergeron and then Keanu Benton. I think people are going to be fine. And people will be like, oh, yeah, that's good. Because you've now solved 3 of those positions with 3 phenomenal football players. I think it's just there's so much focus on round 1 and there's so much focus on the offensive tackles and defensive tackles. And Tony's been right for the last while that like you can't ignore corner as well. Like they do need one. Like we've seen it. We all kind of moan about how like the teams pick on Kindle Vildor. Well, the only way to stop that is to be able to get somebody in there that is capable of being better. Look, would I like an elite pass rusher? Yes. I don't know if there's going to be one there at 9. Same thing for a defensive tackle. If 1 or 2 offensive tackles go before 9, well, then that means one of these corners is falling down. And you don't want to reach for like the 4th or 5th best defensive tackle or offensive tackle if the number 1 corner in the draft is there at 9. I think if you're in the top 10, you need to get like, I know Paul says the blue chip player. I want like a guy that you can believe in going forward that you think, yeah, easily in 5 years' time, he's getting a contract extension. That's the type of player that you want to get if you're in the top 10.
So in my question, and Seth, I want your opinion on this as well, the topic that we're on, but everyone is talking about drafting an elite pass rush. Who are the elite pass rushers in this draft? Because I even doubt that, Will Anderson, at least in the Bears scheme, would be considered an elite pass rusher. Seth, your thoughts on this topic?
In terms of like actual first round elite pass rushers, I don't think they're honestly, in terms of like defensive end, I don't think there really is one. I think there's guys who have the capability, but I haven't seen enough tape to really believe that any of these edge rushers are, massively great. Even with this one right here, I'm not 100% sold on Tyree Wilson. Yes, there are some elements to his game that I really like, but, factor in coming off of an injury and, for him, for a while, I've kind of said his ceiling is Robert Quinn. People might come at me for that, but I kind of see him as that level of player, a guy who can be really good, but is probably going to, have a certain ceiling that he's going to hit it, and you can throw on some tape and find some really exciting moments, but like none of these guys in the first, especially in the top 10, none of them strike me as like, wow, this guy is a game-wrecking pass rusher or honest, like a Hutchinson or something like that, where you're getting a guy who's just going to come in and just dominate for a long time. I think you might be able to find a 2nd to 5th round guy who's got some really good pass rush traits, but obviously to a detriment of something else. But I don't really see that. A lot of people are pitching for Van Ness, and like I don't even have a 1st round grade on him, let alone taking him at 9. So if that tells you what I think of some of these pass rushers, I think Will Anderson is a fantastic player, but I think he'll have some issues in terms of pass rush at the next level. But he'd probably be one of the better ones of the 1st round. So I just don't, I don't see it at this point in time.
Kieran, I saw you shaking your head no when I flashed up the name Lucas Van Ness earlier. Did I misread what you were
your
body length? Tell us why you're not a fan.
He's not subtle, Aldo.
I'm not so. I like to make my opinion known, Aldo. But look, the thing is, right? Like, I understand that there's a lot of projection with Lucas Van Ness, but there's also, I think people kind of look at it as well as, look, he went to Iowa. There's a lot of Bears fans that like the Hawkeyes. There's that link with like Cole Kmet, all that sort of stuff. But like, at the end of the day, I just want the best guy, and I just don't believe that that's Lucas Van Ness. I think you are taking a massive risk with him if you were taking him in the top 10. Look, if the Bears fell back to like, I don't know, 20 and in the 20s, and you're like, okay, Lucas Van Ness is clearly the best edge rusher at that point, would I be mad? No. But I think you're crazy if you're picking him in the top 10, because he's not a top 10 pick, or not a top 10 talent, in my opinion. And I know a lot of this is projection, but I just think there's going to be better players available at that point. So when I see people putting in like their mock drafts, Van Ness at 9, I think you're taking a serious risk at that point in time, especially when you know some of the players we've just spoken about. You're probably going to have like Paris Johnson or Broderick Jones there. You may have Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon, Jalen Carter. And I'm sorry, those players are just better than Lucas Van Ness. And that's just the way it is right now. And look, can he be a really, really good pass rusher at the next level? Yeah, he can, but he's going to need a lot of development as well. So, look, I think if you're falling back in the draft and he's available, I think at that point it makes sense. If you're one of those, I think he should be a top 10 pick. I just don't agree. And that's one of the issues. I'm like, I like some of his raw traits. It's a similar reason why I like Nolan Smith's raw traits. I think he's probably one of the most athletic players in this entire draft. I think if people don't look at like his weight and stuff like that, and you just watch them, be like, oh, dude can be an animal at the next level, and he's able to play in both the pass and the run. And I think Nolan Smith, and I've mentioned this for 2 months now, he's going to go a lot higher than people are expecting him to go, right? Like that's the main thing. Anytime I talk about Nolan Smith, either on the show or on Twitter, I constantly see people saying, oh, he can be in the 20s and in the late teens. I'm like, your PFF mock drafts and all these other mock drafts are not going to get these guys right. From everybody, when we see some of these national guys kind of talking up some of these prospects as we get closer, one of the common traits is guys like Nolan Smith are going a lot higher than what we expect. And the reason is because they're not going to be taken away on different downs, because he can play against the run and play against the pass. But what Seth said is true. There's no elite players that are going to be available at 9 for me. Like, I like Tyree Wilson. I think that you can see a projection there where you're like, he could be a difference maker at the next level. But then if he doesn't make it, you can also say, well, there were signs there to why he didn't develop into the pass rusher you hope he would be. The same can be said for Nolan Smith. You can say maybe the body type just won't work up in terms of the NFL level. You can say the same thing for Van Ness. You mentioned it yourself, Aldo. You can probably say it for Will Anderson playing in this type of defense. And that's why I would be a little bit edgy if you do go edge rusher at 9, because not only is there a lot of question marks there.
See what you did there. A bit edgy. I like it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to point out that Paris Johnson, that thing right there is just false. That is fake news. He definitely gave up a few sacks this season. So let's cut that one.
That's all right. Anyway.
Sorry. I saw that and I was like, that is definitely not true, because I watched go watch that Michigan tape.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, the last kind of point to this is, when you look at what the strengths of this draft are, I think everybody has said it, pass rush. You don't have to go and get one in the first round, because there's plenty of guys in round 2 and round 3 that I think can be as productive as some of these guys that are going to be taken in round 1. Like, it's a different story if you think when you're at 9, it's so obvious that one of these pass rushers are better. But I can't convince myself to be like, I am happy to overlook guys like a Christian Gonzalez, like a Jalen Carter, like one of these top offensive tackles over an edge rusher that I feel like there's guys in round 2 that are just as good. Like, I love Felix Anudike Uzoma. I love Thule from USC as a potential guy. There's guys like Keon White is a really interesting name. That's kind of the maybe end of round 1, top of round 2. I know people have spoken about guys like Derek Hall as well. Like, I just feel like when you look at this edge rusher class, you don't have to force that position in round 1, because I think there's enough talented players in the top 50 to 60 prospects where you can pick one of those multiple second or third round picks that you have. Like, at the end of the day, we have, 4 picks in the top 64. Like, you don't need to do it in your first one. Do it in that kind of middle tier round, because I guarantee there's going to be one of those guys that goes in the second round that's going to outperform some of the guys that go early in the first.
Great stuff. I got to tell you, I love it when we have dissenting points of view. And as Jordan says, I disagree with everything Kieran is saying, but that's okay.
That's all right. I disagree with you too, Jordan, but that's okay.
What I always say, guys, is when it comes to the draft, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Do you know what I mean? So for one person, this guy's going to be better. From another person, he's going to be a bust. You know, and until we actually see them play, we don't know. But like you like, and it's great to have this conversation. It would be so boring if we all liked the same guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's the beauty of this thing. I love it. It's fantastic.
Indeed. You know, maybe next year I'll do this, because I would love to do a show to kind of replicate what is happening in the draft room and make sure that the people on that show have differing points of view, and we have tape to support. So for instance, I'd ask Kieran, okay, this is how you feel about this player. Bring in clips that will support your argument. That would make for a fascinating show. And I know that's going on in draft rooms throughout the country right now. Ryan Poles has talked about the importance of having that kind of environment. And so we've, to a small degree, have replicated it here, and I really enjoy you guys sharing your points of view. All right, I've been saying for some time now, and I'm actually starting to backpedal a little bit on this, but I still feel somewhat strong on this, is that I do believe that the Bears' #1 running back is going to be drafted in this draft, because the class is so deep, and we could find somebody in early day 3 who could, with a good showing in camp, move into that #1 slot. And of course, this is going to be a running back by committee. So when I say the #1 slot, I'm talking about 15 touches to the 10 and 7 to the other guys on the team. So tell me a running back that you would love to see the Bears draft. And if you're going to tell me, hey, we got to go after Bijan Robinson in round 1, which I know somebody in the chat will say, but I doubt any of you will say, but go ahead, give me a solution to this Bears running back problem. Now, a lot of people say, well, there's not a problem with the Bears running back problem. Well, I think that there is, because you signed your so-called #1 running back to just a 1-year contract. So you know there's no future for him. And Khalil Herbert, he started one game last season. He had dismal results. I'm not sure he's really a starter material. I think he's an excellent backup. And Travis Homer is certainly not a starter. He's a special teams guy and a good guy to bring in on third downs because of his great pass blocking ability. So help me, guys, determine who is a good #1 running back to draft. And I'll go to Kieran first.
Oh, thank God, because I was worried that one of these guys are going to steal him, because they know who I'm picking. I've been saying this since, I don't know, January, December. Everybody focuses on Bijan Robinson, but you only have to stick with the same team and go to Roschon Johnson. Mm-hmm. He is my favorite running back in the entire draft class, because I think he fits exactly what the Bears need. Because you look at what did they lose from David Montgomery, somebody that'll get the hard yard, somebody that can block, somebody that's good in terms of the passing game. That's what Roschon was able to do. And the one thing that I really like, and I always say this because I agree that what you draft a running back once they get through their rookie contract, you let them go and you get somebody else in. That's the way you need to be able to do it. And for me, with the way you have it, Khalil Herbert, whenever his contract is up, I say you let him go, you draft somebody else. I think Roschon Johnson is perfect because he had Bijan ahead of him and he was still productive. And you just have to watch kind of how he moves. Kind of, he's not easy to bring down. He is an asset in both protecting Justin, but also he would be an asset out of the backfield in terms of being in that passing game. And that's what I do like about him. But the most important thing is he wasn't absolutely destroyed in college where he had to run basically the entire offense like Chase Brown did for Illinois, right? So that's one of the other things that I really like, because you need to look at some of these guys that aren't going to break down in 2 years' time, that you can pretty much run them into the ground in the full 4 years that you're going to have them and then let them go. So for me, Roschon will be kind of a perfect kind of solution at that point in time. Unfortunately, I do not think the Bears are going to be in position to get him, because I think there's been so many people talking about him now that he is likely going to be a day 2 player. And when I was first in on him, not many people were kind of talking about him, and everybody had him projected in like round 5 or round 6. I'm like, I don't see it. And now it's kind of come to fruition that he's probably going to go much higher. But if I could choose anybody like after round 1, I'd want Roschon.
Okay. Seth, what do you got?
I will go with one of the guys he mentioned. I don't think how much tread he has on his tires is going to deter me. I'm a big Chase Brown fan. I think he fits in this scheme exceptionally well. I think he, outside of pass blocking, does everything pretty darn well. He's explosive. He's got, enough speed to get things done. And he can be a security blanket as a receiver out of the backfield. I like what he offers there. He's a guy I'm high on, and a guy I've mocked to the Bears quite a few times in round 4. I think he would be a really good guy for this offense, and especially if you can lock him in and give him that guy who can catch the ball, because Khalil Herbert, not a great receiver. Foreman, I think he has like 7 catches in his career, it feels like at times. And Travis Homer, you're not just going to have him out on the field all the time just because he can catch the ball.
Mm-hmm. Good thoughts, Tony. Find me a running back.
Well, first and foremost, as people know, I'm not a fan of drafting running backs high. And to be honest with you, and I don't even think we necessarily need to bring in someone in the draft. There's plenty of UDFAs we could pick up. I think Anyway, I'm not going to blast the running backs too much. But
I thought you wanted Bijan Robinson in the top 10 now.
If we were a running back away from the big game, then absolutely. But it'd be daft to be getting anyone too high, even in the 3rd or 4th round. But if I have to pick out some guys now, obviously Roschon Johnson, Chase Brown, very good players. I think what you have to look at is what have you lost with removing David Montgomery. And Seth mentioned it, is catching the ball out of the backfield. That's got to be a big thing. We're not getting that at the moment from the guys that we've got in Herbert, etc. Also, what are we missing? Someone that can pass block. So that's going to be another kind of big thing. Now, all the guys are kind of looked at. There isn't loads of guys that stand out pass blocking. I'm going to say one guy that isn't flashy. He's not the fastest, but he's a good pass catcher. He's a decent pass blocker, and he's a sort of all-round player, and that's Eric Gray out of Oklahoma. I would be happy to bring in someone like that for a specific role in the offense. It's not going to be, for me, a number one running back. It's going to be running back by committee regardless. And having a guy like that would replace the sort of thing that you've lost with David Montgomery leaving. Another guy that I like is Kenny McIntosh out of Georgia. Explosive burst. Another really good pass catcher, really, really soft, natural hands. And again, he's a guy that you don't have to throw everything on top of. He can be part of that sort of committee. And I think what the Bears are going for this year is running back by committee, but every one of those committee members having something that really stands out from the other, whether that's the speed, whether that's the pass blocking, whether that's the pass catching. you've got to have options there. So yeah, if I can't bring in two of the guys that the Seth and Kieran have mentioned, then Kenny McIntosh, Georgia, Eric Gray, Oklahoma would be guys that I would like much later on in the draft.
I'll have to say one thing, because one of our good buddies, Ant on the show, is a massive Tyjae Spears fan, and like just bring another guy from Tulane into the Bears offense, it'll all be fine.
I'd love to get him.
It worked the last couple of times.
I'd love to get him, but I just have a feeling he's going to go high second round.
Yeah.
I've been high on it, so I've almost just written him off, because unless he falls, which I just don't see, because he's just so much fun, and he would be such a great guy. But I can't justify, with the holes in this team, taking a running back in round 2 right now.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
Aldo,
he might go that high. I had a infatuation with Tyjae. Because I was at the Senior Bowl and he played so well over there. He was just making these magical moves, making players miss. And unfortunately, since then, he's went from an early day 3 candidate to potentially being a second round pick.
Yeah.
Now, who knows? He might drop to day 3. And if he does, then I think the Bears really need to make that move for a player like that. And he's not maybe necessarily an every down back, but he is the type of explosive player that I'd love to see on this team. So I'd like to see these speedy running backs, the Devon Achane, I think is the pronunciation. A guy with, sub 4.4 speed, make the team so that he can create big explosive plays. Jahmyr Gibbs is my number 1 overall choice, but he, like Spears, is going to go early day 2. There was a report today, I think it was from Peter King, saying that there are some NFL general managers who like Gibbs even above Bijan Robinson, and I agree. I would prefer to have Gibbs on my team over Bijan, but if I could make, which leads to my next question for you guys, what's the best case scenario that you would love to see the Bears have during this draft? Mine would be for us to get a number 1 running back, still address our other needs that are much more important. But if we can get Gibbs, if we can get Paris Johnson, if we can get a good edge rusher, if we can get a 3-tech, that would be my best case scenario. Tony, what's yours?
Look, end of the day, coming out of this draft,
a kicker.
My philosophy is that everything starts and ends in the trenches. So if we don't have an offensive line, we're not getting anywhere. If we don't have a defensive line, we're not getting anywhere. So the ideal scenario for me coming out of the draft is we get some impact players, whether that's a starting right tackle or left tackle, some interior options in the offensive line. 3-tech is obviously going to be a big thing. We've got no pass rush. I think we have to look at these spots and say, these are where we need to tackle, right? This is where we need to aim for initially. Running back for me, Aldo, I know you really want our number 1. It doesn't, for me, it's nowhere near the top of my priority list. It's close to the bottom. I think I'd rather bring a long snapper in at this point, to be honest with you. I'm joking. But you get my point. But it's got to be, end of the day, if you've got a great offensive line, you can put in a subpar running back and still be effective. And I say subpar, I'm just not talking about one of the guys, Bijan Robinson or whoever, a guy you could pick up in the 5th round or the 6th round even. There are options there, but you got to get that line sorted. Offensive line, defensive line. If that doesn't happen, none of this matters. We're talking about trying to take wide receivers in the 1st round, but if you can't get the ball to them, then what's the point? So it's got to be the lines, trenches. That's got to be the target.
I agree with you, Tony. That's good NFL general manager talk right there. But I'm over here talking like a kid at Christmas. This is what I want. This is what I want. This is what I want. Seth, what's your best case scenario?
I would love, and I've got like my first ever like official mock draft coming out tomorrow. And I would love if part of that came to be, and that is able to get Tippmann and then one of either Bergeron, Paris Johnson, or Broderick Jones. If you can walk away with those two in the first 2 rounds, I think that would be like chef's kiss, really nice situation. If you could find a situation where you can get Bergeron and Tippmann and in the second round and fill a bigger, a fun need in round 1, that would be like my ultimate dream scenario. Because if you can get your starting right tackle for the next handful of years and, maybe a guy who pushes to play center year 1, but has the, buffer of having a Cody Whitehair and a Lucas Patrick ahead of him. And then you can roll into 2024 with hopefully a set line for the next, 5 to 6 years. Because then, you're absolutely right. You've got everything in place offensively at that point to really start, cooking with gas.
Yeah, I think that's a great scenario. There's no doubt about it. And getting Justin Fields the weapons that he needs, as I said at the top of the show, because this is an important year for him, would be a best case scenario. Kieran, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the lads in terms of I think it all starts with kind of the offensive line and defensive line. The way it's worked, I think best case scenario for the Bears is the teams at the top of the draft are idiots and let CJ Stroud fall. And he falls all the way down. And then a team like Tennessee, who's only like 2 or 3 picks after the Bears, trades up. So then you can get an extra second rounder. You pick an offensive tackle in round 1. Then you have enough picks in round 2 to address defensive tackle, edge rusher, and corner. If you're able to, or even center is kind of one of the options there, because those are some of the positions I think in round 2. It's kind of like a sweet spot. There's a bunch of defensive tackles I really like. There's a bunch of corners I really like. There's 2 or 3 centers I really like at that point. And I think that's like an ideal scenario, is that you might just barely get lucky that if one of these quarterbacks does fall and a team behind you does, let's say they want to jump over Tennessee even, and it's a team like the Patriots at 14, for example, and they want to bring someone in. Like, I think that's a really good scenario. But I think overall you need to come out of, I think from the end of day 2, you need to come out with somebody on the defensive line that you feel good about and somebody on the offensive line. If the Bears come away after the 3rd round and they have secured a, I don't know, left tackle or right tackle or a center and a defensive tackle or edge rusher, I think I'll be happy overall, because as kind of we've said on the show and for the last while, it all starts at the trenches. You can get all the wide receivers you like. You can get all the corners you like. You can get all the running backs you like. It doesn't mean anything if you're losing the point of attack and if you're losing the line of scrimmage battle with the opposition. If that's the case, you're never going to win. So that's where I think they really need to focus. Like, I wouldn't even be mad if all the draft picks were defensive line and offensive line. But like, yeah, cool, that's fine. For me, I think that's an ideal scenario for the Bears moving forward.
Indeed. I love it. And I love the work that you guys are doing over at the Irish Bear Show and your website. There's a lot of really good Fanalist sites out there, podcasts out there. Swift is in the chat. He has one of my favorites, the Swift Sports Network. I'm sure everyone here is following his work. Bears Country Podcast, I have a special affinity for that upstart operation run by Dan Shortino. Make sure you follow them. And if you're not a follower of the Irish Bear Show, you really, really need to do so, because their podcasts are excellent. They have great guests. In fact, they have Greg Gabriel coming on tomorrow. They've got a fantastic website. And frankly, guys, I hadn't visited the website in some time. And when I did this morning, let me just put it up on the screen here. It is just fabulous work. And I pressed the wrong button, so that delays my timing. So let's press the right button. And there is the website with the glorious Justin Fields on the cover. And you've got articles. You got articles on the Bears. You got articles on the NFL draft. You got position rankings. Seth has just released this article minutes before he came on air with us, the 5 sleepers you need to know. Guys, tell me more about the work that you're doing and where people can follow you and promote whatever you're doing. I know you guys are also going live during the draft like we are, so kudos to you. Outstanding. There's enough Bears fans throughout this globe for all of us to share in on the fun activities. Kieran, what else is going on? Tell us about the Irish Bear Show.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's loads happening this week. As you said, Gabriel is going to be joining us tomorrow. We're going to do kind of like a war room type episode, and I know Tony, Ant, and Seth are going to be on that show. On Wednesday, we will be doing our final mock draft, and we will be there with Jacob Infante from the Windy City Gridiron. Nice. And then the craziness of the draft happens. I think we have like over 3 days, maybe 20 plus guests coming on, and day 3, the marathon, we always call it, because it took I think it was 7 hours long last year. We're on throughout that, and really for that, we want to get different kind of Bears fans, Bears content creators, all that, if they want to come on the show, because look, it's 7 hours, so anybody, we want as many people that want to be able to talk. You can talk about first round, second round. We will have different times during kind of the streams, or we'll invite people on. If the Bears make a pick that people are happy or not happy about, we will open it up for people to come on. But look, I agree with you, Aldo. It's the whole idea, is we've always said on the show, is we need to get away from the toxicity from a lot of Bears fans and stuff. And that's why we love kind of linking up with you, and because you kind of believe in a lot of the same things that we do, that there's Bears fans all out there that they like to enjoy good quality content. And that's what we try to provide over on the Irish Bears Show, by getting people on that everybody wants to hear about, but also talking about the topics that everybody wants to hear about. And I think that's one of the important things. Really appreciate you kind of showing the website as well. Only recently have I been able to renovate the whole thing, when I think I did at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I don't sleep anymore. but yeah, look, it's been great having everybody on board, but also being able to link up with people. We've had a lot of the lads that are on your program here over on the show, and they're great guys, and we enjoy kind of everything we do. And I think you're probably the same when it comes to draft. It just feels like Christmas is around the corner, and it's just going to be so much fun.
Yeah, indeed. And I know Danny Shimon is going to pop in for some of day 3, about an hour's worth, and then he'll come back over here. So I love the fact that we are sharing resources here, and just it's a team atmosphere. It's a I was going to say something, but I know our political friends would be
at the
upset.
end of the day, we're all Bears fans, right? That's what I try and tell people. I'm like, we're all part of the same community. So exactly. I hate when there's people that are like, you see it on Twitter all the time when they're attacking different people. I'm like, what are you doing that for? Everybody, we all want the team to win. So let's try and actually come together and not just be so divided, which it seems like it's been for the last couple of years.
All right. To Tony, any final words before we release?
I'm just looking forward to going from arguing about who we should draft to arguing about who we drafted.
Well said. Well said. Seth, you care to top that?
No, I was gonna get my once an episode Lions jab in, but I don't think I can top that joke there. But along with the shows, we've got a lot of writers, or a handful of writers, that are putting out some really awesome stuff, not just myself. So check out what those guys are doing, and just writers from all over. It's always good to get various perspectives out there, and there's so many content producers. So just start reading people's articles and
love it,
learning more.
Indeed. I'm looking forward to reading about your 5 sleepers. All right, guys, I will release you and let our audience know that I'll be right back with an interview with Jordan Reid of ESPN. Thanks, guys, very much.
Thanks, Aldo. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aldo.
What I liked about him when I saw him in person at the East-West.
So I think this kid gives you a lot of potential in terms of what you're looking for up front.
I see him in the Bears offense as a Z or a slot receiver, not the X, because they want the real big guy playing the X.
He could be sitting out there in the 3rd round, and you could be getting a guy that could be your situational pass rusher.
I think he's a perfect fit for what I've been told the Bears are looking for.
This is my 3 technique for the Bears, especially if you don't take a guy like Jalen Carter at the top of the draft. This will be a nice pickup. Fits perfectly in the system.
My gut feeling is this would not be a guy the Bears would take.
it's a good name because that's a guy that I'm intrigued by. Obviously, here with the Bears, defensive line, defensive front is a huge need.
I think he's the best center in this draft.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about our Patreon page after I share with you an interview that I did with Jordan Reid late last week. I think it was Friday. He was actually going to be on our Thursday night edition of Draft on Tap with Neil and Danny Shimon. But unfortunately, schedule mishap, not mishap. They needed him to do a live shot over at ESPN. And so the PR department over at ESPN was so nice in making that interview happen. Lily Blum was the PR executive's name. And so many thanks to her. And so Jordan joined me on Friday morning, and I'm going to share that interview with you right now. With me is Jordan Reid from ESPN. Jordan, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. It's draft time. It feels like the week before Christmas. I feel like a little kid waiting on Santa Claus to bring the new presents down the chimney.
Yeah, you're as busy as Santa Claus right now, too, aren't you?
I definitely am.
Oh, man, all the material you're churning out for ESPN and ESPN Plus. The TV appearances, the podcast appearances. You're a very busy man, and we are very grateful that you've carved out some time for us here today. Let me get right to it. You and Matt Miller recently did a draft. This was, I think, on April 14th, and it was a special kind of a draft. This is what you guys wrote. It's a look at who might make sense and should still be on the board at each slot based on two very different draft room strategies, picking to fill a huge team need and picking based on best player available. Now, you chose cornerback Devin Witherspoon. Tell me why you think he's a good choice for the Chicago Bears.
Well, it was a situation of where that's just how the board fell, I should say. And with Chicago, I don't think cornerback is a pressing need for them just because they have some intriguing players there already. Kyler Gordon, he showed that he had inside-out flexibility. Jalen Johnson, I think he's going to return and be a really good player for them. And they have plenty of other players that they're excited about there too. But when we're talking about just taking the best player available on the board that makes sense, Devin Witherspoon is one that I think could help them immediately. And you talk about a player that brings a different type of attitude that they don't currently have on the roster right now. I think he would transcend that group that they currently have.
That's a great point because there is kind of an attitude among those defensive backs. Not that it's bad, but they don't have that kind of, for lack of a better word, bravado that Witherspoon has. Now, your partner, Matt Miller, chose Peter Skoronski for the Chicago Bears. And we all love Skoronski here in Chicago. Obviously, he plays over at Northwestern. We're really pulling for him. But the main concern that we have as Chicago Bears fans is, can he play that tackle position? Because it appears that Ryan Poles, general manager of the Bears, wants to maintain Braxton Jones at left tackle. He's got the interior of the offensive line set with Davis, Whitehair, and Tevin Jenkins. And so the team perhaps is focused on getting a right tackle. Can Peter Skoronski, with those short arms, play a tackle position for any team in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he can, Aldo. And we had this same debate with a former Northwestern tackle that went on to have a pretty good career when he was healthy, and Rashawn Slater. There was a lot of different questions about him, and their measurables were very similar as far as when they were entering the NFL. Now, I think this is a huge dilemma for the Bears just because Braxton Jones was a huge surprise for them last year and how well he played. I'm a big proponent of not mixing and matching and moving around offensive linemen just because it's like learning a new position. If you were to flip Braxton Jones from left tackle to right tackle and then you select a rookie and you move them to that left tackle spot, I think you're creating two holes in one decision. Why not? Let's leave Braxton Jones where he is. Let's take one of these natural right tackles and plug him to a position that he's already naturally played with in college. That's why somebody like a Darnell Wright makes a lot of sense out of Tennessee. Skoronski makes a lot of sense just because he's played all positions up front. He actually originally came to Northwestern as a center. A lot of people don't know that. So with Skoronski, he can play all 5 positions up front. And let's say you don't feel good about him playing tackle, I think he's going to be a high-level starter at guard too.
Excellent. You have Broderick Jones ranked 12th on your top 100, which people can find over at ESPN Plus. You have him above Paris Johnson and Darnell Wright, who are 12 and 17 respectively. Can you tell me why you have Broderick Jones ahead of those 2 tackles?
It's just the upside and the potential. And while he's not in his present state or his current state as good as those players, as he continues to gain experience at left or right tackle, I think he's only going to get better. And we saw that during his career at Georgia. Only started or played in 19 games, has 16 career starts during his time, but he progressively got better every single game. And he's one of those players that just needs continued reps and on-the-job training. And as he gets that, I think his ceiling is limitless. Whereas a Paris Johnson Jr. or even a Peter Skoronski, in a sense, their upside isn't as high, but they're the better players as of today.
Now, over on the defensive line, the Bears are in desperate need of pass rush help. And the mantra here from Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles has been long, lean, and fast. Zach Harrison from Ohio State has 85.5-inch arms or wingspan, and that's the longest in this draft class. Now, he did not run, but all reports are is that he can run a pretty good 40. Tell me what your thoughts are on that particular player, Zach Harrison from Ohio State.
He's one that fits the profile as far as those words that Ryan Poles used. And he was a big-time recruit when he was coming into Ohio State. He was that player that was supposed to be the next Chase Young, the next Bosa brothers, but he just didn't reach that type of potential that they had planned for him. But he's another one of those players that's really young. He's going to be a 21-year-old rookie when he enters the NFL. So there's this belief that he's going to continue to get better as he gets that on-the-job training. And you see glimpses of it. Go and watch the end of the Maryland game. He had 2 sacks to close out that game.
Sack by Ohio State from his own end zone. Again, balls in the air.
He has the length, but he just needs to add refinement with his hands. And right now he plays with sawed-off hands, that I like to call it. He just doesn't understand how to use those hands. So once he gets and he gains more reps, he's going to continuously or progressively get better with understanding how to use those hands, learning how to use moves, and then execute those moves. So I could see them having a lot of interest, whether it's in the 2nd or the 3rd round, if he's still there.
Robert Beal Jr. from Georgia, he ran a 4.44 at the combine, has 34 and 5.6-inch arms. Tell me, give me your quick capsule report on Robert Beal Jr.
He's another one that's really similar to a player that they took a year ago in Dominique Robinson. That probably has to be what I like to call a DPR early on, a designated pass rusher. That's his area of expertise, just because he isn't really strong right now as far as in his lower half, being able to hold up in the run game. You don't want him being the end man of the line of scrimmage just because teams are going to run right at him. So he doesn't have that frame that is stable enough to hold up consistently. So that's probably going to keep him from being a starter consistently long term. But if you use him in that DPR role, bring him in on 3rd down, those NASCAR speed up packages that I like to say, he's going to bring a lot of value there. And this is a team that needs help off of the edge, Aldo, just because their leading sack getter last year was Jaquan Brisker with 4 sacks. And he plays safety. Whenever your safety leads you in sacks, that's not very good for your football team. So they need some help off of the edge. And it would surprise me if they even take 2 or 3 defensive linemen in this draft.
Yeah, in fact, we did a show last night, and we were even speculating that the first 4 picks of this draft could be devoted to the defensive line, and partly because this team's defense, Matt Eberflus's defense, is the engine that makes that defensive line run well is the 3-tech position. Now, and I'm going to try this. Forgive me if I get it wrong. Adetomiwa Adebawore seems to be an emerging.
Not bad at all.
He seems to be an emerging 3-tech in this draft. Tell me your thoughts on the Northwestern Star.
Yeah, he's one that has created a lot of intrigue for himself. Whenever you run 4.49 at 6'2", 282 pounds, you're going to raise a lot of eyebrows and get a lot of attention. And with Eberflus already stating that the 3 technique spot is the engine of the defense, based on what he had during his time at the Colts, we see that he values that spot a lot. Also, middle linebacker, they have already brought over Tremaine Edmonds, who's going to be their Shaquille Leonard in a sense. But just staying on topic with Adebawore, he's a player that a lot of people are intrigued by just because he has the inside out versatility that you love to see at the position, but he's very explosive. Now, there's mixed opinions on if he can hold up at that 3 technique spot or if you want to use him as a defensive end. But if you add him into the mix of your defense, you're already better after that point, just because they didn't have a lot of players that were firm at the point of attack, but it can also bring you value as a pass rusher. And that's really where his area of expertise is.
Another potential 3-tech candidate for this Bears defense is Calijah Kancey. Now, he would be the first defensive tackle drafted with a sub 74-inch wingspan in the last 10 years. It's only 72 3/4. Yet you've ranked him 22nd in your top 100, again on ESPN Plus, and your second overall defensive tackle. Tell me why you like him so much and why you think maybe his size will not be a detriment in the NFL.
Well, an undersized, explosive defensive lineman from Pitt, we've seen this song before, right? We've heard the song before, Aaron Donald. I'm not saying Calijah Kancey is going to be Aaron Donald, but there's going to be teams that value that type of explosiveness, especially when he can couple that with very strong hands, very violent hands, and he just understands how to get after the quarterback. That's an area that a lot of teams are going to really value. And even though he isn't very firm at the point of attack as far as a run blocker or run defender, I should say, that's where he needs to clean up the most in his game, needs to add some weight in his lower half. But from day one, he's going to be able to give you areas, or he's going to be able to give you reps of where he just gets after the quarterback. There was nobody that can block him along the interior at Pitt. Just understands how to create pressure and penetrate the first level of the line of scrimmage. That's something that the Bears didn't have last year. So I think Kancey will be a really good fit for them. But I just don't know if he's going to be able to be a full-time player as far as playing him on those early downs, just because there are going to be some teams that can blow him off the ball a little bit, especially when you double team him. So he has to get better as far as his firmness at the point of attack. But if he can improve on that, he can be a starter for you very early on.
I want to get back to the Bears, the middle of the Bears offensive line, because with Cody Whitehair potentially being the starter, there is a chance that he might be cut, depending on, of course, what happens in this draft. And the Bears could save some considerable money if he's a post-June 1st cut. So you tweeted that you graded John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tippmann similarly. Which of those two centers you think is better suited for the Bears' outside zone blocking scheme?
I think it would be Tippmann, just because he's the better athlete. He's a little bit taller than John Michael Schmitz, but he moves much better. John Michael Schmitz is your one that really likes to win in a phone booth, create a bully aspect, a bully mentality to his game. Tippmann is more so the best of both worlds, of where he can beat you in a phone booth, but also he can win with angles and beat defensive linemen over either shoulder. So I think with Tippmann, he would be a better fit just because of the requisite aspects or the requisite traits that are going to be asked of him in that outside zone scheme.
Jordan, I've been saying now for months, and I'm probably going to be proven wrong, but I truly believe that the Bears' number one running back in the 2023 season is going to be drafted in this draft. So given that the team has so many needs in the trenches, can you give me a name of a day 3 running back, or a couple of names that you think could be viable starters for the Chicago Bears offense?
Well, there's one that I really like, and it's Dwayne McBride from UAB. Now, he doesn't have a whole bunch of catch production. I think he only had maybe 1 catch last year. They really used him in the running game, and that was all. But as far as running between the tackles, running on the perimeter, he has it all. Just talking to him at the combine, he's a very upbeat individual. And I love talking to him about that LSU game, just because he's used to getting 100 or 200 yards in every game, but he had under 50 in that one. He said it was a very frustrating game, but he wanted to go out there and compete, and it was a great experience for him. But he's one that I think is going to really outplay his draft slot very early on. And another is Israel Abanikanda from Pitt. He's much smaller than Dwayne McBride, more so of that 1B type of rusher that can come in and be a change of pace running back. And he had 6 touchdowns in one game last year against Virginia. He was phenomenal, broke all of Tony Dorsett's records in that one. So that was a great game for him. But there was plenty of other games of where you can see his skill set, much more versatile, one of the more versatile running backs in this entire draft class, has the make you miss ability, can take plays 60 to 70 yards at a time and finish with scoring 6 points in the end zone. So that's an asset that he brings to the table. So I like Abanikanda a lot, probably in that 4th or 5th round range.
Now, the Bears utilize a fullback on their offense from time to time. What do you think about Hunter Lipke? Is he the best fullback in this class?
Yeah, Swiss Army knife. He can do it all. North Dakota State used him in a variety of different ways. They used him as a fullback. They used him as a running back, a tight end, H-back, kind of in that Kyle Juszczyk role, like San Francisco used him with Kyle Shanahan. He really can be, not saying he can be a Juszczyk type of player on the next level, but just talking about his role of where he can wear a lot of different hats, which is something that the Bears may find value in. So he's a player that could go in the later rounds that goes on to be a key part of this offense.
I love this tight end class, Jordan. There's really some talent there. We could potentially see some quality tight ends drafted in day 3. Who are some of those kind of day 3 tight ends that you've seen at the Shrine Bowl game or at the Senior Bowl game that caught your eye?
Yeah, there's been a lot. We could see as many as 7 tight ends go in the first 3 rounds, which is something we haven't seen in quite a long time. But Luke Schoonmaker from Michigan is one that I would definitely keep my eye on. He's one player that is very tall, is a very rangy skill set, can catch the ball outside of his normal frame, can be a blocker, inline blocker, isn't a mauler in a sense, but he can survive and maintain. As a single blocker, can get hip to hip with offensive tackles on double teams too. He has plenty of experience doing that during his time in Michigan. And then another is Brenton Strange from Penn State, more so of the athletic mold. Isn't a great blocker by any stretch of the imagination, but you're talking about somebody that can be a day one difference maker in the passing game. He definitely can bring that to the forefront.
You've already mentioned a couple of small school names, but I was interested to get more information, more of your opinion on small school guys that you think we should be looking for, NFL fans that should be looking forward to in this NFL draft.
Yeah, there's a lot. This is a really good small class as far as positions. Cody Mauch, interior offensive lineman from North Dakota State. He's one that probably could go inside the top 75 picks. And there's plenty of others. Aubrey Miller from Jackson State, who had a really good Senior Bowl, linebacker from Jackson State, I should say, who had a really good Senior Bowl. Was unfortunate that he wasn't was unfortunate that he wasn't invited to the combine, I should say. I thought he definitely was worthy of that. But those are 2 small school players definitely keep an eye on.
Hey, are you hearing anything about Tyree Wilson's medicals? I saw him on the NFL Network the other day. He looked healthy. If you heard anything, we were all concerned when the doctor released the letter saying that everything was fine, that they've asked him not to work out just to let the scarring heal. And Greg Gabriel, former director of Bear Scouting here on the Barroom Network, told us usually when a letter comes out from a doctor like that, that's a sign that there's some concern among some NFL general managers. Have you heard anything regarding Wilson's foot injury?
I haven't, and that's the tough part about being on the media side. We don't have access to the medicals. We're not meeting with team doctors. We're not putting them through physical examinations at the combine, like what they go through. So I don't have any information on that, so I can't really speak on that. But as far as the player, I love the player. He's the number 7 player on my big board. I like him a lot. Was able to see him live and in person this year against NC State, which is one of his better games. Reminds me a lot of Carlos Dunlap. As far as the big physical profile, it's just the big kid on the playground right now that's just bigger, faster, and stronger than everybody, but needs to add some refinement to his game. So hopefully that foot is healthy. Hopefully it's all healed up. And if so, I think he's going to be a top 10 pick.
Very good. I can't let you go without getting your take on a team that you have followed and rooted for many, many years, the Minnesota Vikings. What are your hopes for the Vikings and what they should accomplish in this upcoming draft?
Well, with only 5 picks, I would be really surprised if they didn't try to trade back at some point, whether that's at 23 or even in the 3rd round. They don't have a 2nd round pick right now because of the TJ Hawkinson trade, but I would be really surprised if they didn't trade back. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who's the general manager there, his first draft, he did not stay at his original draft slot at any pick. So he traded out of every draft slot that he had last year, and it wouldn't surprise me if they end up moving out a lot this year. And I want them to get 8 to 10 picks just because I think they lack depth at a lot of spots. Cornerback is one area that I would like to see them address. Also wide receiver. So they have a lot of holes on the roster right now. A roster that's kind of stuck in neutral right now, in my opinion. I know they won 13 games last year, which came as a big surprise to a lot of people. but there are a roster that had a little bit of turnover this year, getting rid of some older veterans like Eric Kendricks, Adam Thielen. The list goes on and on, some of the other players that they have added. So looking forward to seeing how they continue to add some younger pieces to this roster.
Jordan, I got to tell you, I became an ESPN Plus member solely because of you, because I love your work. I followed it, of course, for years, and I have no regrets. The rest of the material on there is fantastic. Please tell our audience where they can catch up with you on social media and also read your work and watch you on the screen.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Of course, Aldo, I have to shout you out every time just because you were the one that gave me my first opportunity in the journalism space back during the old bar room when it was the NFC North bar room. So those of you that don't remember the original NFC North bar room, Aldo, you mean a lot to me, and I always have to come on the show whenever you ask me. So thank you for subscribing to ESPN Plus. That's something that we take a lot of pride in, getting out and sharing draft nuggets that we hear. You can find me on Twitter at Jordan_Reid. That's REID, JORDAN_REID. You can find me there on Twitter. And of course, like we talked about a little bit earlier, finding mock drafts, positional rankings, and then my final big board of 380 players just came out on ESPN Plus too. So go ahead and check that out alongside my colleagues, Mel Kiper Jr., Todd McShay, and Matt Miller.
All of them are great, and I've just started studying your top 100. Actually, how many is it? It's more than 100, right?
Yeah, it's 380 players on my final big board.
I've just started studying that. I got up to about 78, and so now I still got a lot of work to do. It's going to be fun for me, and it's always fun following your career. Thank you very much, Jordan, for being a part of this show.
Absolutely. Thank you as always.
All right, that's my interview with Jordan Reid. I've known him for a while. He was doing some writing for our site. We were known as the NFC North Bar Room when I first started this back in 2014, and we had bar rooms for all of the NFC teams. And then a couple of years later, I said, "What the hell am I doing? I don't give a shit about the Lions, Vikings, and Packers." So I just concentrated my efforts on Bears Bar Room. But getting to work alongside guys like Justin and Jordan and BJ Rydell and a number of other people. I won't name names, but it was a blast. Exactly, Swift. It was the NFC North Bar Room. And Aldo says, Swift says, "Aldo, I blame you for bringing Don Burr into the Bears fold." Yes, I attract Lions fans for some reason. All right, let's move to the final portion of our show. I wanted to share some of the draft reports that we have up on our patreon.com/barroomdraft. It is $10 to get access to, I think it's 160 draft reports. They average about 3 to 4 minutes in length, and some of them as much as 7 or 8 minutes, and then some of them a couple of minutes. And so I've whittled some down here to give you a taste. If you subscribe to get prepared for this week's draft, it's just $10, and then cancel your subscription immediately after you're done. And so it is, all of the draft reports are supplied by Greg Gabriel and Danny Shimon. And I'm going to start with one here that Greg was told by somebody. Oh, I did load it, didn't I? Regarding, here it is. McClendon Curtis. Greg saw a comment during GTF, and he issued this report on McClendon Curtis.
Somebody, when we recorded the last GTF show, brought up this guy and said he's another Braxton Jones. I hate to break his heart, but I don't see that. Curtis McClendon from Tennessee Chattanooga, and he's a guard, and he's a big guard. He's like 6'6", 324. Look like on tape he's well over 340, and that he got down into the 320s for the combine. He had a 7.73 cone, a 4.97, which is poor, and the 20 shuttle, but his straight line speed was okay. It was 5.24. Braxton Jones is one of the more athletic linemen on the Bears team. his change of direction is excellent. All you got to do is put on the tape from games last year and watch him in space. And that guy is agile as hell. He's got great bend. The only thing he needs to get is a little bigger and stronger in the lower body. Once he does that, he'll be fine.
When he played against Illinois this past year, he had an awful game, according to reports. I did not actually see the game.
I saw some of it, and I agree.
So what does that do from a scouting perspective?
Well, I mean, you want to see what he's going to do against the best competition, because that he's going up a notch. You know, Tennessee Chattanooga's FCS, so you want to see what he's doing when he's jumping up a grade or 2 levels in competition, so to speak. And he failed the test. Yeah. You know, is he good enough to play for a team in the right scheme? He's good enough to be a backup. Or be a practice squad guy. But I can't. I mean, he could be the last guy on earth, and I can't see the Bears signing him because he just can't play in this offense.
Yeah. Let's stay on the topic of offensive linemen. This is a report on Matthew Bergeron, who could end up being with the Chicago Bears as a second-round draft pick, given the fact that it's a strong possibility that the Bears will not go offensive line in round 1.
My positives for Bergeron: solid size with an athletic frame, displays a natural bend and balance, quick off the snap with solid feet and speed and agility. Solid strength to be able to turn, twist a defender and as a run blocker, understands positioning and angles, and is efficient at walling off and hooking ends on stretch runs. He can get out and lead backs through the hole and is able to elevate to a second-level run fits, displaying some of his athletic ability. Solid kick slide to set spot with natural knee bend and lateral agility to mirror and pass protection. Can play both the left and a right tackle spot. Flashes a mean streak as a run blocker, looks to play through the whistle and finish his blocks. His negatives: lacks the ideal arm length and eventually may be kicked inside to guard. Needs to get stronger and add some muscle. Can get overpowered and knocked back on speed to power moves, losing his balance, getting out leverage, and struggling to recover. Needs to get better at sustaining those blocks at both the line of scrimmage and in space. My summary: overall, Bergeron projects as a functional starter at either tackle position or possibly inside a guard. He is an experienced 3-year starter who displays quick feet, agility, and explosion desired in an up-tempo, zone-based blocking scheme. He's a better run blocker than a pass blocker currently. He will need to learn to sustain longer and get stronger at the next level. So I project that Bergeron is tailor-made to be in a zone, a stretch blocking scheme, something similar to what the Bears have right now.
That's, of course, Danny Shimon, the star of this show, Draft on Tap. As I mentioned earlier, he and Neil are unable to join us, but you're going to get plenty of them later this week. Round 1 will be live, and John Buffone will be leading the coverage along with Danny and Neil, and then we'll have coverage the rest of the week, and Jordan Silvera is going to be a big part of that coverage. I'm excited to hear his point of view. You know, Jordan, one of the things I love about Jordan is when he attaches his opinion to something, he is steadfast with it. Not to say that he's inflexible. I'm not saying that at all about Jordan, but I love the way he will pound the table for his offensive linemen, and it's going to be great to have him as part of the coverage. And then on Saturday, day 3, we're going to have a number of people. I have an extended invitation to Swifty and a number of other folks. So we're going to have kind of an open mic type of deal for our coverage on day 3. More on that as the week progresses, because I frankly got to organize it. But let's get back to some of these draft reports. We talked about Israel Abanikanda. Israel Abanikanda. Here's an edited down report on the Pitt running back.
In terms of how he projects for the Bears, I think he's a nice, ideal fit for this scheme, for this system. He's a guy that, again, has the patience to allow his blockers to develop or get in place and allow the blocking to develop. He's got the vision to be able to kind of feel and see that the lane, the cutback lane develop. And then again, the 1-foot plant and go ability is what I like about this kid and his talents as you project him at the next level. Now, the one area in which he needs to improve on is being able to be a reliable pass catcher out of the backfield. only had 38 receptions throughout his career, 12 this past season. So he doesn't give you much in terms of the passing game.
And that's a big part of what I want in my running back. I want a sure-handed, reliable pass catcher. I thought that last season Fields did not, or perhaps this was a Getsy issue, but they underutilized David Montgomery in the passing game. He definitely had good passes. If you go back and look at his 2022 stats, you'll see that he would go through, 1 reception, 2 receptions, 5 receptions, 2 receptions, 3 receptions, 1 reception. And that for me in this offense is just a massive underutilization of your running back, particularly someone as sure-handed as David Montgomery proved to be as his career with the Chicago Bears went on. Let us move now on to, let's see, I'm going to pick a guy who I think we've all fallen in love with. Actually, I want to share this one with you about Marvin Mims. Here's another player that I've fallen in love with, and I mentioned when we had on the Irish Bear Show show host on the show that I really would love to see an explosive, game-changing player on this offense. And if it's at the running back position, sensational. But if it's at the wide receiver position, that would be great too. Marvin Mims is a candidate.
Mims is probably one of my favorite receivers in this entire draft class. He came in at 5'11", 183 at the combine with 31 5/8 arm length, ran a 4.38 40-yard dash with a 1.55 10-yard split, had a 39.5-inch vertical with a 10-foot 9-inch broad jump and a 6.9 3-cone times. All these numbers correlate to his tape to show off that explosive ability in terms of his lower body, his ability to make plays down a football field. So ranks 3rd in school history with 18 receptions of 40-plus yards or more. So this is a guy throughout his 3 seasons at Oklahoma has made big-time plays down the football field. Overall, for me, he projects as a complementary player, a role player at the next level with an outside chance to develop into a number 2 starting type receiver. He possesses the physical traits to emerge as a legitimate big play weapon and dynamic receiving threat down the football field. He will need to continue to work on and develop his route running ability and add some much needed muscle to his smaller frame. But this is a kid for me has a chance to be one of those guys where 3 years down the road you're like, how did this guy last into the 4th or 5th round of the draft? And he could come in and become, if not an instant impact player, he's a guy that can develop into a pretty good damn receiver at the next level and be a guy, like I said, 3 years down the road, be like, how did he last so long in the draft? So that is my scouting report on Marvin Mims Jr.
Here's another guy whose name is rarely mentioned. I think he's being forecast as a 6th or 7th round pick. Speedy running back. I'm going to screw up his first name. Xavier Valade.
In terms of how he projects for the Bears, overall, he projects as a role player who can be part of a platoon at the next level. He's a nifty-footed runner with enough run strength and burst to be productive in a downhill power scheme or a one-zone cut scheme as well. So he brings you some of that scheme versatility as a running back. He is a guy that is very comfortable, catching passes out of the backfield. You see him running wheel routes to the flat, real soft hands, can extend off away from his frame and reel in the catch. So he'll be a weapon in the passing game as well.
Jimmy Tony says, can Mims play tackle? He has longer arms than Cansey. I think I have longer arms than Cansey. So, I fell in love with this guy, Cansey, when I watched the tape on him. I was like, hey, I found my Aaron Donald. And then the measurements came out, and it was such a disappointment. So and I think it was Jordan that said it's not the arms that bother him, it's just his size. Is he going to get blown off the line of scrimmage? So something that we will definitely be watching as the draft comes on here. Let me focus now on cornerbacks, because we know we're going to address the cornerback position somewhere in this draft. So let me start with this report on Corey Trice from
his suddenness looks average on tape, but he's physical. He plays the pass well. Plays in their defense. He plays a lot of off and zone, and his ball skills are good, and he makes plays You know, he's a tall guy with real long arms. He makes plays with his length, and because of that length. Now, he's a physical guy too, and so he has the size and the physicality to be a pretty good safety. Now, whether he's got the instincts, because you don't see him playing in the center of the field, I can't answer that because I did make a school call. But really, there's not anything about his game that I don't like.
Intriguing prospect from Purdue, or as Greg likes to call them, Purdon't for some reason. Julius Brents is a guy who I look at, and he reminds me of Peanut Tillman.
Ran a 4.53. Now, here's another thing where his speed doesn't correlate with the jumps, because he had a 41.5-inch vertical and 11.6 long jump and a 6.63 3-cone. That is a sudden guy, and he's 6'3". He just jumps out on tape. Quick and sudden, very easy movement, very good in press, strong jam, and mirrors well, closes well, good ball skills and hands, consistent in run support, solid tackler, can be a big hitter, best in press, but very good and very alert and aware in zone. I said early starter. This guy's a heck of a player.
He is a heck of a player. Julius Brents, I have fallen in love with. Jordan says Juju Brents is a fun watch. He really, really is. All right, I got another couple of cornerbacks to look at. Let's go to Terrell Smith's evaluation.
Very steady, very consistent, good size and length, plays a lot of off at Minnesota and plays it well. That translates. If you can play off good, you're a good player. And because it's probably the hardest coverage to play. Translate well to the two press, being able to do that. He's very effective in zone, alert and anticipates well, closes very quickly, very good hands and ball skills, good run support player. He'll hit you.
And let us move on to Clark Phillips. Really interesting.
6 interceptions in 22. His ball skills are outstanding. 8 interceptions over the last 2 years. Very good ball skills. Very quick and sudden, fast, explosive, instinctive. Before the combine, I wrote my notes. How tall is he? Well, now we know, 5'9". Might be a slot corner in the league, but plays outside at Utah. Cannon does support. He's a good tackler. May have short arms. He does, 29 and 8. How he measures will count, and he didn't measure good. So at that height and having short arms, I can't see the Bears drafting this guy.
No surprise. We all know about Greg's distaste of short-armed cornerbacks. Trey Tomlinson was another corner that Greg Gabriel filed the report on.
The good news is he's 4'1". The bad news is he's 5'8". He's a very good player. He's too small. And when Flus was at the Colts, they had a limit on as far as drafting corners. They had to be a minimum 5'10" and a half. Well, this guy comes up more than 2 inches too short. So he ain't going to be a Bear. It's real simple.
Only time will tell if Eberflus is going to change his mind on drafting corners, defensive backs with short arms like that. The key thing is that drafted. You know, when you're drafting players, you want players who kind of fit the scheme, fit your profiles of players. And so let's see if Eberflus really brought that profile of cornerbacks with him to Chicago. All right, a couple on the defensive line. We talked about Zach Harris. Well, actually, we talked about Zach Harrison earlier. This is, I believe, Danny Shimon on Zach Harrison.
I think he's a guy that can come in and be a part of a rotation or a backup as a base left defensive end. Not a premier guy that can get after the quarterback and be a premier sack artist. You know, he's a guy that could have a long career at the next level, you know, getting 4, 5, 6 sacks a season. Again, being a nice base defensive end guy that can, you know, set a hard edge, funnel everything back to his line mates inside. And then also maybe possibly, you know, have the ability to kick inside on passing downs where now you can, again, get in there, you know, use that strength to be able to pull or push those interior offensive linemen back into the quarterback's lap. And if you don't get there, put your long arms up and see if you can disrupt and bat balls down at the line of scrimmage.
Sam Rush says, show some love to Darius Rush, Jacorian Bennett, and Isaiah McGuire for us. Absolutely, Sam. I love all three of those players. Would love all three to become members of the Chicago Bears. Our next report, sticking with another player I would love to see with the Chicago Bears, Yaya Diaby.
This season came on as a pass rusher. The more I watch, the more I like him. Lines up inside and outside, right side, left side, up and down. He's strong. He can set the edge and plays contained really well. Good natural pass rusher, but still raw. Sometimes he tries too many moves. And now I'm watching and I go, just fucking go. Some pro coaching will do this guy wonders. Wouldn't shock me to see him go in the 3rd round. I'd rather have him in the 4th because he's like a one-year wonder. But, pass rushers always go higher if they got talent and when you got that kind of speed, 4.51 and jumping ability, he'll probably come off the board pretty quick.
Yaya Diaby, definitely a player to keep an eye on. Probably early day 3 is my guess. There's a chance he will go in the 3rd round. We will see. We will keep it here on the Barroom Network. We'll have live coverage throughout the entire draft. KK says Brent Stevenson and Rush, all nice players. Jimmy says don't forget about Riley Moss. Jordan says, I love Zach. He's got rare traits. Victor says, I like Terrell Smith a lot. Sam says, Danny agrees with me that Zach Harrison is Adonis. I saw that earlier that you posted that, Sam, and I think it was Jordan or Swifty said that, Zach's got more speed than Izzy. And let's see. Swift says, Darius Rush is my guy. We all got our favorites, and that's what's going to happen this week as the draft wears on. We're all going to be disappointed because a lot of our favorites are not going to get drafted. Sam says Yaya is interesting. He really is. I got a chance to talk to him at the Senior Bowl. He was the guy. I posted this video when I asked him, how badly do you want to be in the NFL and do great things? He goes, I want it bad. But most of all, I want it from my mom because she's done so much for me and my siblings, helping us, working hard to provide for us and so forth. And when he said that, I started to choke up because this was 3-4 weeks after my mom had passed. And when I mentioned that to him after the interview, the guy gives me a great big hug, so a really sweetheart of a guy. And but aside from that, the guy can play football. And if anything, he just needs to tone down his kind of zeal to get to the quarterback and play a little bit more within himself. Michael Jordan, after being coached by Coach Phil Jackson for years, started using the mantra, let the game come to you. And I think that applies towards a lot of the position areas in football. Jordan says, this year I'm going to see who my Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir, Logan Hall, Roger McCreary are this year when they inevitably end up anywhere but the Bears. That is true, Jordan. I remembered you so much banging the table for all of those players, especially McCreary. So it is going to be interesting to see who our favorites are not chosen. Yaya, baby, is what Swift is talking about here. Yaya, yay, says KK. KK, what a cool name that is. And J Rock says Roger McCreary has short arms. Yeah, he does have short arms. He had a decent rookie season with Tennessee. And Jordan says McCreary turned out awesome for the Titans. I wouldn't say awesome. I think he had a good rookie season. He's not playing yet at that awesome stage, but can he get there? There's a likelihood that he can, so we will see. Swift says Jordan skies this year, Skoronski, Van Ness, DeJuan Jones, and Tittman. Jordan, you want to confirm that? I do think based on your tweets and what I've seen you post here at the bar room, that seems to be a fairly comprehensive list of your secrets. And Jordan says, ha, Swifty knows me well. Michael Henneman says, we know there's going to be a Bears pick that comes out of left field. Happens every year. So yeah, Swifty and Jordan, tell me who that pick out of left field is going to be. And anyone else who has an opinion on that. AC Adam, I hate when guys I loved in college end up as divisional opponents in the pros. I am so with you, AC, and that is why I am worried about Jalen Carter. If Jalen Carter is drafted by the Detroit Lions and he ends up being that superstar 3-tech, the havoc he is going to wreak on the Bears' interior offensive line is going to be monumental. All right, so here's a name that we got from Swift. He likes Wanya Morris, and Wanya is somebody that I said a couple of unpleasant things about him in terms of the evaluation, and Swift says, go back to the tape, Aldo, and I did, and I have to admit, he's better than what I thought I saw with my own eyes down at the Senior Bowl. So Swift says, oh my God, me too, although I don't want them getting Carter or Will Anderson. Yeah, is it possible that we can figure out a way for the Lions to forfeit one of those picks that they have, that preferably the one before the Bears? And Jordan says, what can I say, fellas? I have a type. Haha. I like them big and strong and still Bambi slipping over themselves on the ice. And Swift adds identical arm length, size, and athleticism as Braxton. He is talking about Wanya Morris. Wanya Morris, I am sorry for the negative things I said about you. I have been, thanks to Swift, a convert. So I'm going to close the show on this note. My apology to Wanya Morris. How's that? And let you all know that we've got lots of Bears coverage this week. We resume with that tomorrow night on the Bear Their Soul show. Dan and I and Johnny Santucci will be talking about the draft and a number of other things. And then on Wednesday, it's going to be our show, Mac and Reid. They're moving to Wednesday for this week to provide about 90 minutes of Bears draft coverage. And then on Thursday is when all the fun begins with our live coverage. And also Greg Gabriel is going to do a couple of shows this week after round one, on Friday morning, and then also on Saturday morning, he will file some reports based on what he has seen, what he's heard, and his evaluation on the players selected. A couple of more comments just came in. Jordan says, Aldo, who are you lowest on in this class? Who am I lowest on? Oh, man, I would say Lucas Van Ness. I'll tell you why. I can't tell you the reason why, but I have heard some things about Lucas that I've been asked not to talk about publicly, and so that's why I'm a little bit concerned. Now, these are allegations. We don't know what's true, what's not, but Lucas Van Ness is somebody that if the Bears drafted at 9 or anywhere really, I would wonder, well, why? I mean, well, I would say that the information then that I got would probably be incorrect. So Swift says he's not perfect. He just fits Pole's profile a lot. And that's he's again referring to Morris. Sam adds this about Morris. He would be an ideal swing tackle. And Swift says for him, Christian Gonzalez would be a guy that is Christian a guy that you don't want to see drafted or that you do? I'm assuming that you do just because he's so freaking phenomenal. So we'll leave it there. I could go on all day here, but we're over at 2 hours and 15 minutes. I got a lot of prep work to go, so please excuse the abrupt ending. It's always fun, though, talking with you guys via the chat and presenting tons of the stuff that we have. Let me see if he's not high. Oh, wow. He's not high on Christian Gonzalez, and he says he likes Witherspoon and Joey Porter Jr. more. Swift, when you come in this weekend to talk draft, let's talk about that topic because third day of coverage gives us an opportunity to talk about players that were drafted, to talk about the complexion of the draft, what were good picks, what were bad picks, and so forth. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Day 3 of the draft is when we really can explore a lot of topics. The first 2 days are going to be tons of fun too. Jordan, I love you too, brother. And with that, we'll close this show. Thank you, Sam, for saying it's a great show. And we'll close things off with a thank you very much to everyone who's joined us live in the chat. Thank you to Jordan Reid. Thank you to the Irish Bears Show, guys. Great show. Those guys are so much fun to talk to. Make sure you follow them on Twitter at the Irish Bears Show. We'll lead you to all of their other Twitter handles. And Jordan Reid can be found at Jordan_Reid, REID. With that, I'll say good night or goodbye, good afternoon, whatever.